And we can make the Zoom meeting. Share my screen. There it is. All right. I think that's got everything in place. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
All right. I was trying to get all the computer pieces in place.
I am going to go off camera and stuff my face.
That's perfectly fine. As I say, for everyone, feel free to both come on camera or unmute or use the chat to interact. There's many different ways to participate, and if you're watching this live on YouTube, then feel free to join the live chat. If you are watching this recorded on YouTube, then you can either contact me directly or leave a comment or question in the chat area underneath the YouTube recording. It is exactly 12 o'clock, which means we have to give it a moment because exactly 12 o'clock means everybody is still catching up to all of the technology. 12:01. Okay, well, now we're getting close to our time. So we're going to go ahead and begin the rolling open, and hopefully this won't cut off anybody who's joining a little bit later. So, good afternoon to everyone. We are catching up to our Torah cycle. Last week we had to do a makeup because of a computer failure the previous week. But this week we are resyncing with the standard cycle here in the diaspora. And that means we are in Parashat Eikev. It also means that we are now hurtling towards the end of the book of Deuteronomy because it goes a lot faster than people expect because it is full of so many different mitzvot, some of which we've seen, some of which we've seen, but now we gain another details, some of which we haven't seen at all, but we are going to be introduced here. And Devarim is an incredible smorgasbord to pick from. A huge proportion of the total number of commandments are found here in the book of Devarim, both as repeats with clarifications as well as for the first time. Now, traditionally, we say that there are 613 commandments, but we're going to challenge that number today. Don't worry, we're still going to end up at 613. We're not breaking with tradition that much. But I would like to point out that the number 613 is not an accidental number. It is not a number that was stamped somewhere in the Torah either. Instead, it is a number that has a meaning, and it is also through that meaning that we can uncover a lot more about our relationship, not just to the commandments, but to God. And that's going to be our theme for today, rather than any one particular mitzvah. To help you understand what I'm going on about, we're going to look here in chapter 10 and verse 12. And again, you're welcome to read along with me here in Sefaria, or you can find a copy of the Torah on your own. But we're going to go ahead and use the Fox translation because it is just clear enough while still remaining some ambiguity to help trigger our better understanding of the text. So, chapter 10, verse 12. And now, O Israel, what does Adonai your God ask of you? And this is a fairly important question. Indeed, this is sort of the fundamental question behind not just Judaism, but most religions, which is to say, what does our God want from us? What are we meant to actually be doing? What is our life supposed to be? What are we supposed to feel about all of this? More than just the encounter with the divine is the relationship with the divine. And this is giving voice to that question that is within the heart of all of us. And Moses is going to make it, appear quite simple. What does God ask of us? Except to hold Adonai, your God, in awe. Awe, of course, being here the word yirah, which can mean awe. It can also mean fear. Usually it means sort of the overwhelming acknowledgments of God's greatness, which moves us to behave in a more righteous way. It's not horror house fear, but it's also not just the sort of generic awe that might come from seeing the Grand Canyon. To walk in all his ways, to love him, and to serve Adonai your God with all your heart and with all your being. Something that may be familiar from last week's Torah portion of Et Hanan when we read the Ve'ahavta, except here there is a term missing. B'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha. We're missing me'odecha, with all of your might. That is a conversation for another time. But for the moment, let's just do a quick summary of the few things that Moses has told us that God is asking us for. Just to have God held in awe and to love and to serve. Now, love, serve, and walk sound very platitudinal and generic, but they were not meant as such. This is a general exhortation telling us that we must live according to the way God wants us to live. Now, if you are a careful reader and a good thinker, you're probably going, but wait, that's not very specific. How do I know what God actually wants me to do? Well, that comes up a little bit more here in verse 13. To keep the commandments of Adonai and his laws, which I command you today, to have it go well for you. It's ending that rhetorical question of this is what God wants of you. So that's it, right? The God just wants us to love, to revere, and to follow the commandments, to follow the hukim, the statutes, the laws. There's many ways to try and translate that in order that we, well, have it go well for us, which is kind of unusual. You might have thought we should do this in order to avoid God's wrath, or we should do this in order to curry favor with God, or we should do this for some other benefit that would accrue to God. But no, the purpose of this is for our own benefit. Through this relationship with God that leads to these activities, we come off better than if we had not been doing so. And that is ultimately the underlying feeling behind all of the commandments, that the reason the Torah was given was so that we could enter into this moment and enter into this relationship. Now, that does not mean we're done, because keeping the commandments, following the laws, the statutes, all of the different terms we might come up with, requires a great deal of study and investigation. And there is an extensive list. Traditionally, there is supposed to be 613 commandments. But as I said at the outside, that number is never stated explicitly anywhere within the Torah itself. Instead, we are going to look at the origin of that phrase, but more importantly, how that phrase is also used as a springboard for a deeper understanding of what we have begun to discuss right now. So we're going to jump out. I know it's unusual to only do 2 verses of Torah, but we have a very long section from the Talmud coming. So we're going to jump out of the Torah and into the Talmud and see what this means in the eyes of all of our tradition. So hold on to your hats. We're going to be talking about the 613. So here we are in Masechet Makot, and there is a long statement by a rabbi known as Simlai. There are a few digressions that happen because the Talmud loves its digressions. Remember, going off topic just means you are expanding a topic into a new realm. It doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. And we'll keep coming back to Rabbi Simlai's overall idea. For those of you that are not used to the Davidson translation that comes to us from Sefaria, anything that is in bold is a more or less direct translation from the Talmud. Anything that is in the lighter font is a commentary that's been added in to make the very choppy literal translation read a little bit more easily, as well as explaining some of what's going on. And then, of course, I'll be adding in my own layer of explanation on top of that. So let's get down to work because, well, we've got quite a few pages. Rabbi Simlai taught, there were 613 mitzvot stated to Moses, 365 prohibitions, corresponding to the number of days in the solar year. Now, prohibitions here mean thou shalt not in the King James type language, and 248 positive mitzvot, corresponding to the number of a person's limbs. Positive mitzvot mean thou shalt. So don't murder is a negative commandment. Doesn't mean it's bad in that sense of negative. It means it is canceling out a particular action. Whereas observe Shabbat has some negative commandments in it as well, but also has many positive commandments. To honor one's parents has a positive commandments. To bring a sacrifice for Pesach is a positive commandment. Those are the thou shalt adding to our activity rather than canceling something from our activity. Now you'll notice that that number 613 seems to be coincidentally or perhaps deliberately drawn from this ideal of two archetypes. 365, our ancestors knew that there were 365, more or less, days in a solar year. And the 248 was considered by their science of the day to be the number of pieces in a person. When we say limbs in rabbinic literature, we're not talking about an arm. So no, we're not some crazy tentacle beast. Instead, it means the different portions. So add up all the bones and all of the other bits. And 248 was their belief of how many components there were to a person. So together, it means that we serve God with every part of ourself every day of the year, which is a beautiful metaphor for our relationship with God. However, that 613 shouldn't be taken as gospel until we have shown that it actually comes from something in the Torah. Because like I said, the Torah never explicitly says there are 613 commandments. So where do we get an idea that there's 613 are there? Well, Rav Hamnuna said, what is the verse? Moses commanded to us the Torah, an inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. This is one of those lines that we sing when we are doing the Hagbah ceremony, where we have the Torah lifted up. And Torah, Tziva lanu Moshe, Moses commanded us the Torah. And the word Torah, in terms of its numerical value, is 611. That is to say, if you use each letter of the word Torah as a number, which is perfectly normal in Judaism, then if you add up each of those digits, then you reach the number 611. Obviously, we are a little short. In addition, I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods. These are the first two of the Ten Commandments that we heard, meaning the entire nation heard, from the mouth of the Almighty, for a total of 613. Just to make sure you understand that logic, Moses commanded us all of the Torah that we didn't hear directly from God, and that word Torah, meaning instruction, just so happens to be 611. Well, according to many of the opinions in our tradition, we all heard the first two commandments from God directly. Therefore, Moses wouldn't have had to command those. So if you take the 611 of the Torah itself and you add the two that we all heard directly, you get 613. Very neat, and a very nice way of reminding ourselves that we have these two primal commands of recognizing God's existence and recognizing God's uniqueness as being something that is baked into each of our souls directly. And then the rest of the Torah, yes, was brought to us through Moses as the prophet able to behold the clarity of Torah more clearly than anyone else. All right, now, that'd be a nice place to stop. Just 613 mitzvot, every part of me, every day of me. I heard some from God directly. The rest comes in this neat math formula. Should be fine. Obviously, that would be a rather short class. So instead, we are going to take a look at where the Talmud goes with this, because Rabbi Simlai is not done. King David came and established the 613 mitzvot upon 11 mitzvot. All right. This is an archetype for these paragraphs that's going to get repeated. So let me try and explain what's going on here. Rabbi Simlai is looking at other parts of Tanakh, the other parts of the Bible, and saying, but you know, other people have done summaries of the commandments, much like we just read from Moses. And their summary seems a lot more condensed than 613. It's almost as though they were looking for an enumeration of the commandments. And what Rabbi Simlai discovered is that there aren't so many enumerations of all 613, but there do seem to be condensing. There do seem to be shorter lists that in one way or another are the foundational pillars out of which or upon which the rest of the 613 would rest. So we're going to start off with the longest list. Each list gets shorter. That's part of the literary structure we have here. And we're going to start with this longer list, and then we're going to break down each one of the points, each one of the 11. So we're looking here to Psalm 15, a psalm of David. Lord, or Adonai, who shall sojourn in your tabernacle? Who is worthy to be in the Mishkan? Who shall dwell upon your sacred mountain? Who's going to be this person that's connected to you there in Jerusalem? Well, he who walks wholeheartedly and works righteousness and speaks truth in his heart, who has no slander upon his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor takes up reproach against his relative, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, and he honors those who fear the Lord. He takes an oath to his own detriment and changes not. He neither gives his money with interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. He who performs these shall never be moved. So let's see how this is an 11-point breakdown. And we're going to see that, according to the commentary, these are all references to the way other people have behaved. So who is he who walks wholeheartedly? This is Abraham. We have a verse from Genesis 17, and it says, walk before me and be wholehearted. So there is a connection of terms there that links us in to Abraham. And the idea is that Abraham was doing something that was the essence of walking wholeheartedly. We're going to come back to the totality of these concepts when we go towards the end, but for the moment, let's just look at each one individually. Number 2, works righteousness. Well, this is someone like Rabbi Hilkiyahu. That was one of the people in the Talmudic period, a laborer who would not pause from his labor even to greet people. He righteously continued working. All right, so notice immediately that we are not only going to talk about the great people of the Bible. We went from Abraham, the greatest of the great, to, well, somebody that was great in the generation of the author, who was famous as being an employee. This is a worker. And this was a worker who was so righteous that while he worked completely. This was not somebody checking their phone. This was not somebody who was wasting time that he was being paid to use for the person who had paid him. Judaism has a lot to say about the responsibilities of both the employer and employee. And right now, we're just focusing here on the employee has an obligation to work in a way that they were hired to work. And he would do so even at the expense of greeting someone. That was his focus. And that is considered a sort of above and beyond level. But we could all aspire to have that level of dedication. Point 3, and speaks truth in his heart. This is referring to one such as Rav Safra. Now, Rav Safra, we're going to get the backstory here in the commentary. This is somebody who was reciting the Shema, which requires full concentration. And when a person approached him to purchase an item, someone came up to want to buy something while he was in the midst of his prayer. He intended to accept the man's offer, meaning the person said, I'll give you X for this. And in his heart, he heard him, but he was unable to respond because it was prohibited to interrupt the recitation of the Shema. When you're in the Shema mode, you're only in Shema. The buyer misinterpreted Rav Safra's silence and concluded that Rav Safra demanded a higher price. So he raised his offer. So the customer is bartering with himself, basically, and is raising his amount because Rav Safra is remaining silent. Rav Safra, once he finally finished the Shema, insisted on selling him the item for the sum that he was offered initially. He wasn't going to take advantage of the confusion of the situation, and if he was prepared to accept that first offer, then just because the customer had mistakenly thought he should offer more doesn't mean that Rav Safra should take advantage of him. Instead, he said, no, I was fine with your first offer. I just couldn't respond. And so I will sell it to you for the first offer. That is speaking truth in his heart, because in his heart, he knew he was okay with that first offer. And therefore, even though he could have taken more and the buyer seems to have been fine with that. In his heart, he would have known that was a lie. And so he revealed what was truly in his heart, even though it would cost him the difference between the first offer and the final offer. Part 4, who has no slander upon his tongue. This is our forefather Jacob, a rather controversial choice of this, because he did not want to mislead his father in order to receive his blessing. As it is written from Genesis 27, perhaps my father will feel me, and I will be in his eyes like a fraud. So he is worried about appearing like a fraud. He does not want to lie. He does not want to deceive. That is somebody who has no slander upon his tongue. Now, obviously, if we go back and look in the book of Genesis and this whole incident, he ends up misleading his father. He does end up distorting things, but he clearly did not want to and was doing so solely because of his mother's insistence upon this in a way to fulfill what had originally been promised when she was pregnant with the twins. So we can analyze Jacob another time. Indeed, I have. Go back and look at many of the different classes I've done on Toldot and also Vayetze, and you can see more about that whole scenario there. Number 5, nor does evil to his neighbor. This is referring to one who did not infringe upon another's trade, constituting illegal competition. Judaism has an extensive section of Jewish law that deals with how one can compete in a lawful manner and how one should not compete in an unlawful manner. It is not all bets are off. It's not all fair in love and war. Being involved within a community means following the rules of community when it comes to business practices, even against your competitor, or I should say, especially against your competitor, because there you are most incentivized, perhaps, to break the rules, and that means you have to be most careful not to. Number 6, nor takes up reproach against his relative. This refers to one who draws his relatives near. Just like in the modern world, the ancient world was constantly dealing with fighting among different family members, whether it be siblings or cousins or others that were often bickering. And this is trying to say, while we always have a legitimate right to pursue our legitimate needs, we need to do so in a way that is drawing people closer to us rather than doing in a way that is excessively or aggressively confrontational. Number 7, in whose eyes a vile person is despised. And yeah, sometimes we are reminded that people that are actually bad, we need to actually think of as being actually bad. And the example that comes for this is King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah came after his father Ahaz, who was a terrible, terrible man, and he dragged the bones of his father, King Ahaz, in a bed of ropes. This was a way of showing that his father had been such a horrible, murderous, terrible man that King Hezekiah was breaking from his father's ways. And this was a reassurance to the nation and to God. King Hezekiah is one of the kings that is felt to be pretty good. Most of the kings in the Book of Kings don't measure up. Really, it's Hezekiah and Josiah are the only two that are considered pretty good. Some were decent, most were terrible. All right, number 8. And he honors those who fear the Lord. This is Jehoshaphat, one of the better ones, king of Judea, who, when he would see a Torah scholar, would arise from his throne and hug and kiss him and call him my father, my teacher, my master, my master. The king is not commanded to rise for anyone because that's part of the status of the king, but he would, according to our tradition, rise and pay honor to those that were scholars of Torah. And that, of course, is being held to his credit. Number 9, he takes an oath to his own detriment and changes it not, meaning that he acts in accordance with the conduct of Rabbi Yochanan, as Rabbi Yochanan would say in the form of a vow when seeking to refrain from eating in another's home, I shall fast until I will come to my house. So Rabbi Yochanan would often want to not impose upon the hospitality of others, especially if they were poor. And so he would make a vow saying, I swear in the proper form to not eat until I come to my house, right? I'm in the middle of a fast, therefore I can't eat in your house. This was a way to avoid imposing upon their hospitality, which might impoverish them, but also not to excessively embarrass them. But of course, that meant that he would have to wait until he got home to eat, because having made that vow, he had to stick by it. He couldn't just say it and not follow through. Others might have considered it fine to just make a little white lie. Rabbi Yochanan was not one of them. As we see from other parts of his life, he was somebody that stuck to his guns. And in this way, he exemplified the idea that if you've made a promise, you follow it through, even if it isn't always for your benefit. Number 10, he neither gives his money with interest, meaning he does not lend money with interest even to a non-Jew, which is technically permitted by Torah law. So the Torah does technically allow us to charge interest on loans when we are dealing with people that are not Jewish. But this ideal here in point 10 is that obviously, since you can't charge interest to somebody that is Jewish, if we are celebrating a person who doesn't charge interest, it means we must be celebrating a person who doesn't charge interest, even when technically he would be legally permitted to do so. That is to say, in the case of lending to somebody that wasn't Jewish. This is a common rabbinic technique when looking closely at text. If it says he doesn't do something that's prohibited, like charging interest, then we don't interpret it to mean he just doesn't do what everybody doesn't do, or at least shouldn't do. Instead, we have to find a chiddush, a novelty to the behavior that explains why it needed to be singled out. And in this case, it's he wouldn't charge interest even to those whom he would be permitted to do so, but his own character would prevent that. And the last part takes a bribe against the innocent. This is such as Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Rabbi Yossi, who refused to sit in judgment in a case involving his sharecropper. Since the latter would bring him a basket of fruit, he was concerned that he might unconsciously favor him. This is a form of recusing yourself in order to make sure that you can identify the innocent. And even to go to such an extent to, quote, not be bribed, that even something that wasn't a bribe, but might nonetheless just make me a little bit more biased in your favor, I have to be aware of that tendency and thus step away from it. Because otherwise I could be tempted, even with my best of intentions, to lean in the favor of the person that had done me, had done me a favor. All right. Little digression, but a very important one, as the Talmud is wont to do. It is written, he who performs these shall never be moved. All right, that was the end of our phrase. When Rabbi Gamliel would reach this verse, he would cry. Now, why is he crying? Well, he said, it is one who performed all these actions who shall never be moved, but if he performed only one of them, he shall be moved. So Rabban Gamliel, one of the greatest of greats, he is weeping because as he reflects upon Psalm 15 and all of these different character traits that keep us from ever being moved, meaning distanced from God, he is concerned that it says he who performs these, meaning all of these, is the only one who will get the benefit. But if you did just one of them, then you're not really in the category that David is talking about. The sages, meaning the other rabbis around, said to him, is it written, he who performs all these? That is to say, does the word kol appear within the Hebrew? Rather, he who performs these is written, right? That's the phrase that's actually in the Tanakh, indicating that one is blessed even in a case where he performed one of them. All right, now, they've made that claim now. They have to come with some proof for this. As if you do not say so, meaning if you want to hold, no, it's implied that you have to do all of them before you receive any benefit at all. If that's the position you want to hold, then compare that to a different verse. that is written with regard to severe transgressions punishable by karet. This is taken from Leviticus 18. Do not impurify yourselves with all these. Now, would you say that there, with regards to the transgression, it means that it is one who comes into contact with all these who becomes impure, but one who comes into contact with just one of them, no? Right? Clearly within that context, everybody would agree that the Torah is definitely saying if you come into contact with any one of these, then you have to actually purify yourself before you would do anything else related to the temple service. And if you are a Kohen, you are not allowed to deliberately make yourself come into contact with them at all. Well, no one would believe that you had to become ritually impure by coming into contact with all of them before you would have transgressed. Clearly, it means any one of them would trigger the transgression. Well, if you can understand and believe that about the transgression, then it flips that whole narrative for where we are. Rather, is it not that it means with all these, rather that the phrase with all these means with one of all these. So here too, in the idea of performing the good deeds, the one who performs one of all of these has a place in the world to come. That is to say that it is not required to do all of those things in order to secure that blessing of going with triumph into the world to come. Instead, simply doing one of them will get you to that as well. Now, does that mean if you didn't do any of these, you have no place in the world to come? Absolutely not. That is not the intention whatsoever. This is where the rabbis are engaging less in a direct theological debate about the actual threshold, and more about the emotion, the connection that we have to our commandments. Which is to say, there are certain commandments that when a person is able to perform them, it helps lock in for their self that sense of right and wrong that allows them to not drift so far away from God that they would eventually lose that connection that brings us into the world to come. That some commandments are like anchors that hold us tight once we have performed them, in a way that other commandments still help, but don't guarantee in the same way. All right, now, it may be hard for you to remember all 11 of those, and that's perfectly fine. Rabbi Simlai can go a little better. Rabbi Simlai's position continues. Isaiah came and established the 613 mitzvot upon 6. So yes, we are going to be continuing our I can name those mitzvahs in how many notes? And now we've gone from 613 to 11, and now we're going from 11 to 6. As it is written, this time in Isaiah 33, he who walks righteously and speaks uprightly, he who despises the gain of oppressions, who shakes his hands from holding of bribes, who stops his ears from hearing blood, and shuts his eyes from looking upon evil. Now you're going to notice there's some overlap here with the 11 that we just saw. And indeed, both from the 6 and the 11, if you are to think carefully, you'll also find overlap with the other 613 commandments. That is the whole idea, that you can deduce more from the shorter verses. And the shorter verses are, of course, easier to bear in mind. So, he who walks righteously, number 1, this is our forefather Abraham. Hey, he gets double mention. As it is written, Genesis 18, for I have known him, that he will command his children to perform righteousness and justice. So there is walking righteously. 2, and speaks uprightly. This is referring to one who does not shame another in public. A huge element in Jewish law is devoted to trying to teach us how not to embarrass another person. And the ultimate test of speaking uprightly is that we do not cause that embarrassment. 3, he who despises the gain of oppressions. This is referring to one such as Rabbi Yishmael ben Elisha, who refused to sit in judgment in a case involving one who gave him priestly gifts to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Sounds very similar to our case back up in Psalm 15. He who shakes his hands from holding of bribes, meaning refuses to take hold. This is referring to one such as Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yossi, who, as explained above, refused to sit in judgment in a case involving his sharecropper. 5, who stops his ears from hearing blood. This refers to one who would not hear derision of Torah scholars and remain silent, such as Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, who was well known for that. And number 6, let's get this down here, and shuts his eyes from looking upon evil, is to be understood in accordance with the statement of Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Said Rabbi Chia bar Abba, this is referring to one who does not look at women when they stand over the laundry at the river. The women would lift the garments they were wearing to keep them out of the water, thereby expose parts of their bodies. So shutting your eye from evil means that it is your responsibility to not look lecherously at others, to not deliberately put yourself in a place where you can really engage in voyeurism on someone else. That there was still is a propensity to objectify someone else, especially sexually, and to not look upon evil means that you are acting in a way that doesn't take place. And it is written with regard to one who performs these matters, these 6, continuing from Isaiah, an Isaiah quote, he shall dwell on high. His fortress shall be the munitions of rocks. His bread shall be given. His water shall be sure. Meaning, if you can anchor yourself with these from these 6, then you are going to be a fortress. You are unassailable. Unfortunately, it doesn't mean that you are perfectly immune from physical harm, but it does mean that your spirit is going to be more steady. Now, maybe 6 is too hard to remember. What about if I told you there were 3 that you could focus on? Micah came and established the 613 mitzvot upon 3. As it is written, it has been told to you, humanity, what is good, and what the Lord does require of you, only to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. To do justly, this is justice, fairly straightforward. To love mercy, this is an allusion to acts of loving kindness. And to walk humbly with your God, this is an allusion to taking the indigent dead out for burial and accompanying a poor bride to her wedding canopy, both of which are to be performed without fanfare, glorifying the doer, meaning the person that is donating. So when somebody has died and there is no one in the family or no one of their family to help take care of the burial, then without fuss and without fanfare, we take care of that as an act of mercy. And this is done humbly rather than with some, hey, everybody, look at the amazing thing I'm doing. Likewise, when a woman would need to get married and without the support of the community, she might not be able to afford to, you step in and help it be done, but you don't do it in a way that draws undue attention to yourself, that you do it humbly. You'll note as well the implication of this is that when somebody is poor, God is still with them. And when we walk with the poor person in our assistance, we are therefore walking with God. And when we do it in a non-vainglorious way, then we are doing it humbly, as is being emphasized here in Micah. And another aside, and are these matters not inferred a fortiori? A fortiori is not actually found in the Talmud. This is a phrase in the Talmud that's called kal v'chomer, meaning from the weak to the strong, meaning if it is appropriate in a minimal case, then clearly it would be appropriate in something that was of an obviously more serious nature. For example, if with regards to matters that tend to be conducted in public, meaning funerals and weddings, the Torah states, walk humbly when doing them, then in matters that tend to be conducted in private, for example, the normal acts of tzedakah and Torah study, all the more so should they be conducted in private. So what this is trying to say is that, yes, we shouldn't behave in these public acts in a very proud way, and all the more so if we shouldn't do it in something that's public, then when we're doing things that are normally private, we should definitely be doing them humbly. That whenever you're giving tzedakah, it should not be with a great effort of drawing attention to yourself whenever you are studying. It should not be done in a boastful way of, hey, I just finished this book and I just finished this book. Aren't I great? Sharing what you've learned, sharing that you are supporting an organization to encourage others to do so, that's perfectly fine. But we do have to always be careful that we are doing it in a way that is humble, rather than doing it just for our own pride or arrogance. All right, now we're down to 3. That seems pretty compact. Justice, mercy, humility, boom. Most of us could be all right, doing all right on a daily basis with just that 3. But we're not done yet. Then Isaiah established the 613 mitzvot upon 2. As it is stated, so says the Lord, observe justice, that's number 1, and perform righteousness, that's number 2. And then Amos came and established the 613 upon 1. So says the Lord to the house of Israel, seek me and live. Now, we're going to get a little aside and push back on Amos here, but just I want you to understand what we're doing. Observe justice and perform righteousness. Seek me and live. Well, okay, observe justice and righteousness and perform righteousness. I guess I can understand that what you're saying is that all of the Torah is ultimately a manifestation of justice and righteousness. But then Amos comes along and says, yeah, but even justice and righteousness is ultimately about our manifestation of our relationship with God. Seek me. And indeed, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak objects to that that's not quite the best example, because there is no proof that the verse in Amos is establishing all the mitzvot upon 1. Say that Amos is instead saying, seek me through the entire Torah, right? The verse could be interpreted, rather than being 1 mitzvah, as instead saying, find me through all the mitzvot. And the verse, because the verse doesn't specify the manner in which one should seek the Lord. So Rabbi Nachman Bar Yitzchak is saying it's not the best example. Rather, here is your 1 mitzvah. Says Habakkuk, prophet with the best name ever. He came and established the 613 upon 1, as it is stated, but the righteous person shall live by his faith. Done. That if you are living by your faith, you will behave righteously. But what is that faith about? What is that faith in? Well, that takes us all the way back to our beginning. We started off with 613 commandments. Now, 611 of them were not mentioned directly. Obviously, they were alluded to. Instead, the only 2 that we all know directly are, I am the Lord, and you shall have no other. That when we anchor ourselves in a relationship with God, just as its own entity, as its own bubble, if you will, that if that relationship is true, if it is a relationship that we are passionate to develop, to grow, to explore, then everything else will cascade out of that. That ultimately the commandments may be for our benefit, but they start by our relationship with God. That the commandments can be dealt with and handled mechanically, and unfortunately many people do, and sometimes fortunately, because even without the right spirit, following the mitzvot is worthwhile. But ideally, we will recognize that the commandments are there as a reflection of our relationship with God, as well as a ladder towards our relationship with God. That it is not just enough to do them, it is also important to constantly remind ourselves that these flow out of that connection to God. That we are living, that we are living righteously because we are trying to explore our faith, our relationship with Adonai. And ultimately, that's what we have to bear in mind as we go through these latter chapters of the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, that we are going to see mitzvah after mitzvah after mitzvah, each one worthy of study, investigation, and obviously observance. But we have to recognize that these mitzvot are there in order to pull us towards God, and that we will be able to best live through them if we try to seek God through them, if we see them as an expression of our faith. And that when we are in a moment of choice, when we are in a moment where we must decide to observe or not observe any one of the 613, that if we come back to this anchor, if we come back to this notion of, I am in a relationship with Adonai, the same Adonai who was there for Abraham, the same Adonai that was there for our ancestors from Egypt. What should I do at this moment? How do I live in this relationship when it comes to this decision? Sometimes it's easy, don't steal. Sometimes it's a little bit more complicated, and we may need to study, investigate, or ruminate on the choices that are before us, because not every decision falls neatly into a black and white do or don't of a particular commandment. And in order to fill in all that other parts of our life that are not immediately recognizable as commandedness, we have to come back to this relationship. We have to come back to this sense of seeking our faith through living righteous in order to come closer to God. And that is an incredible way of trying to not just guide our behavior in the observance of 613 mitzvot, but to guide our behavior in all of those other areas of life where the commandments don't seem to tell us exactly what to do. They don't tell us which job to take very often. They don't tell us what hobbies to pick up. They don't tell us what to have for dinner. Might rule out certain things like pork chops, but it doesn't tell me how to actually make decisions in a wide variety of other parts of life. But Habakkuk, as well as all of the other statements that we've gone through, whether it be 1, 2, 3, or all the other counts, are trying to tell us that there is a way to live that transcends the 613. Don't think of the 613 as being the pinnacle of Jewish life. Recognize them as being the foundation. That indeed life is much more expansive and much richer than just the 613. And that is what we must seek, and that is how we must try to find a way to live. All right, I will leave it there for today. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. I knew we had a lot to get through, and I think the pacing worked kind of all right. But if you have additional questions for right now, feel free to unmute. Or if you have comments, you can unmute and share in Zoom. If you have other questions you'd rather put into chat, that's fine. And of course, we can talk more later, both in person, through the YouTube chat, or any other means of communication. All right, everybody, take care, be well, and I will see you next week.